Hey, thanks for making it to Veterans Info Tap. I'm glad you made it. This headline is disturbing. 87,000 veterans are missing out on $844 million in benefits. How come nobody told them? I'm going to dive into that with you right now. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. I really appreciate it. 2 asks, hit the thumbs up, let the video run. I appreciate it. You want to support the channel in other ways, you can do that by becoming a member. You can go to the homepage. You'll see the highlighted members there and a join button. Thank you so much to all you members. Let's jump into this. So I found this article. Actually, I found a few different articles online regarding this exact subject. This just came out August 29th of 2024. And there's different variations of the headline. And so this is the one that's on military.com. And it says here, 87,000 Vietnam veterans may qualify for $844 million in benefits. How come nobody told them? So jumping into this, in the span of just a few weeks, Mark McCabe traveled this summer to Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, California, and Texas. But the 74-year-old wasn't on an epic retirement trip. As a pro bono veterans advocate, he was searching for Vietnam veterans and surviving family members who may be eligible for disability compensation. McCabe, a former combat corpsman attached to the Marine Corps units during the Vietnam War, has survived 2 bouts of cancer himself. He has been a veterans advocate for 2 decades, but his job has gotten a lot busier thanks to a spat of new legislation that has expanded benefits for millions of veterans exposed to toxic chemicals in war. Now, I'm going to stop right there. This is an extremely important topic, and it's not just important for Vietnam veterans. It's important for all of us to understand the nuance of the VA and the different benefits that can kind of be attached. And here's a great correlation between the Iraq, Afghanistan veterans as well with the Vietnam vets, right? Is those presumptive conditions. Okay, presumptive conditions that are really prevalent for both of those combat veterans, right? Or wartime veterans in specific areas that would have, resulted in those presumptives. So here's the thing. It doesn't just impact you, the veteran, right? Understanding how all this stuff works, but your surviving spouse when that time may come, right? Maybe it doesn't come, but maybe it does, right? Your surviving spouse could be eligible for a whole host of benefits that they are not aware of. The case in point here, and I'm not sure if they're going to talk about it, would be Vietnam veteran has ischemic heart disease, or they have hypertension, which are both presumptive conditions for Agent Orange. And then subsequently they pass away from a heart attack. You could have heart attack on the death certificate. You can have ischemic heart disease as a contributing cause. You could have high blood pressure, hypertension as a contributing cause on the death certificate, because this information is on the death certificate and its presumptive conditions, and the service member served in a presumptive location. The surviving spouse would be eligible for dependency indemnity compensation, paying out between about, $1,600 per month, all the way up over $3,000 per month for a whole host of varying, different little add-ons. So it's just every circumstance is different. The bottom line is that it's money out there that is for that benefit that many people just aren't even aware of. So let's jump back into this and see what's going on. So it says here, technically, the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs should be the ones notifying veterans when they may be eligible for new benefits, but McCabe says they often don't. They're leaving them behind, he says. And the Department of Veterans Affairs' very own Office of Inspector General agrees. In an unsparing report this summer, the watchdog estimated that the VA has failed to inform up to 87,000 Vietnam War veterans and their survivors that they may now qualify for retroactive compensation benefits because of exposure to toxic herbicides such as Agent Orange. If that sounds like a startling number, consider this. Those overlooked veterans and their families could be entitled to more than $844 million, the report said. All right, I'm going to segue here to Nemer. Maybe or maybe not, you may have heard of Nemer. Okay, Nemer was a lawsuit back in the day that really worked out for the benefit of veterans, specifically Vietnam-era veterans. I'm just going to read a little bit on Nemer. If you believe that you potentially have a Nemer case, my suggestion, work with an accredited rep, potentially an accredited claims agent, or have a consultation with an attorney, and of those three, make your appropriate call on what you think you need to do. All right, so the Nemer case and the PACT Act are both related to veteran benefits and claims. Nemer case. In 1986, Vietnam veterans and their survivors filed a class action lawsuit against the VA, alleging that the VA improperly denied their compensation claims for service-connected disabilities caused by Agent Orange. In 1991, the VA agreed to re-adjudicate claims for veterans who served in the Republic of Vietnam. The Nemer case resulted in a list of presumptive conditions, right, that are automatically associated with Agent Orange, and veterans with these conditions are eligible for benefits without having to prove service connection. The PACT Act added new presumptive conditions that veterans may be eligible for benefits, including hypertension and, I cannot say it, monoclonal gammopathy. It's close enough. Of undetermined significance. However, Nemer does not apply to these new presumptive conditions except for DIC recipients. That's your Dependency Indemnity Compensation recipients. The VA can still apply Nemer rules on its own, as it did when Congress added bladder cancer, Parkinsonism, and hypothyroidism to the presumptive list. Okay, so what is Nemer really about? It really extends the back pay out further, is kind of the bottom line. There could be a potential for a much larger back pay when you incorporate Nemer for certain circumstances. So again, have that conversation and bring that up with your accredited rep. Everybody's situation's different, and I just want to make sure that it doesn't just get kind of blown past. All right, so moving on. There are millions of dollars at stake that Vietnam veterans and their survivors should be receiving, says Bart Stichman, co-founder of the National Veterans Legal Services Program, which represents veterans and benefits appeals. And while there is widespread agreement that America should compensate its veterans for their sacrifice and service, there's growing concern about where all this money is coming from, especially as the cost continues to balloon, thanks to the recently passed PACT Act, which added coverage for potentially 6 million more veterans exposed to toxins from burn pits and other sources during the Vietnam, Persian Gulf, and post-9/11 wars. America will soon owe veterans trillions of dollars in medical and disability compensation, said Linda, B., a professor in public policy at Harvard Kennedy School. Despite the pledge, she said, we don't really understand the cost. We don't have a function that is keeping track of all the accrued promised benefits the way we should. Facing a record budget shortfall, VA may be unable to pay benefits to millions of veterans as soon as October. Remember, there's that $15 billion shortfall, essentially, almost $3 billion this fiscal year, which, there's only a month left, and about $13 billion or so, 13 billion for next year. So, good times. Moving on, it goes on to say, promises broken. In 1986, Stichman and other lawyers brought a class action lawsuit against the VA on behalf of Vietnam veterans and survivors. The resulting consent decree required the department to recognize presumptive conditions for Vietnam veterans. Illnesses the VA assumes are caused by exposure to Agent Orange during military service, and pay disability and death benefits to those suffered from these ailments. VA, quote, so I'm not sure where this is. It says VA hate the fact they ever agreed to it, so they try to think of every possible reason they don't have to do what they should do, says Bart Stichman, special counsel at the National Veterans Legal Services Program, who sued VA on behalf of veterans in a landmark case known as Nemer versus the Department of Veterans Affairs. The decision was continuous. In '89, Senator Alan Simpson of Wyoming questioned the science connecting Agent Orange exposure to veterans' health problems and told Senator Kennedy on a radio program that providing coverage for presumptive conditions was political pandering to powerful special interest groups. Kennedy called Simpson an Agent Orange AI. I don't know. All right. By 2021, the scientific evidence was clear, linking Agent Orange to even more illnesses. The National Defense Authorization Act that year expanded the list of presumptive conditions for Vietnam veterans. There are now more than 20 of these conditions, including bladder cancer, lung cancer, prostate cancer, and more. But critics say VA has always been resistant. They hate the fact they ever agreed to it, says Stichman. So they try to think of every possible reason they don't have to do what they should do. When the list of presumptive conditions was expanded in 2021, VA announced that it would send letters to all Vietnam veterans who were previously denied benefits to let them know they may now be eligible. But using statistical analysis of VA health records, the Inspector General report found that VA may have missed nearly 90,000 people. The report also estimated each veteran was missing out on average of $372 per month. McCabe, who volunteers with the nonprofit Vietnam Veterans of America, said he has helped more than 800 veterans and survivors file benefits claims or appeals since the list of presumptive conditions was expanded in 2021. Even if a veteran gets a letter that they may be eligible for benefits, McCabe says the technical jargon that the VA uses is confusing for veterans who are often in their 70s and 80s. When it comes to Agent Orange benefits, he said the agency is simply not explaining it well enough. A fragmented system. And look, here's the thing. VA says they're reaching out to everybody. Don't ever buy that, because you could be ships missing in the night. You get some email that got buried, or you got a phone call that went to your, you thought it was a junk call. The message wasn't clear. You're better off just to lean forward and push forward yourself. So anyway, a fragmented system. One of the problems is the fragmented nature of the Department of Veterans Affairs, which has multiple large branches that are tangled in bureaucracy. Disability payments for veterans are governed by the Veterans Benefits Administration, while the actual health care is done at the Veterans Health Administration. Brent A., the VA's Deputy Assistant Inspector General for Audits and Evaluations, said the reason the estimated 87,000 letters were never sent comes down to who has custody of a veteran's health information. The Office of Inspector General said the veteran should automatically be notified about benefits if they have a diagnosis for a presumptive condition in the Veterans Health Administration records. The Benefits Administration disagrees. Stan's on one. It is what it is. For those that don't know, Stan's my rooster, and he lives right next door here. All right. So, moving on, it says if records are... Let's see. So the Benefits Administration disagrees, which is interesting that they would. Its interpretation, he says, is that veterans should only be notified about benefits if their health records are already included in a claims folder in the Benefits Administration system, but are not, I don't know how to say it, says that shouldn't make a difference. If the records are already in the Veterans Affairs system, he says, we think that they should look at these veterans to see if they do require readjudication and possibly back pay and earlier effective dates. Okay, so what they're basically saying here is if you filed for a claim and you were denied, then later on that claim that you got denied for, that condition, becomes a presumptive condition, they should reach out to you. That's one version. right? And then they should say, hey, look, you filed for this claim before, we denied you, but now it's a presumptive condition and now it's going to be approved. So we're reaching out to you to get that re-adjudicated, and we're going to process your claim and give you back pay and all that good stuff. That's option A. And that totally makes sense, right? I filed for a claim. I get approved the claim. The other version here is I never filed for that claim. Never filed for a claim for, we'll say, hypertension. I have a 70% rating with the VA. I filed for a bunch of things. I never filed for hypertension. And now, later on, and I didn't even have hypertension. Now, 10 years later, I develop hypertension. But I'm going to the VA for all of my care, so they document that I have hypertension. Now, I would say that this is the right thing to do. It's going above and beyond. The other option, and this is what they're pushing for here, is the VA now knows you have hypertension. And they know that your service timeframes make that a presumptive condition. They should notify you to file a claim because they're recognizing it. And I would say that that kind of falls under the umbrella of duty to assist, but kind of above and beyond, right? It is an above and beyond, I guess, approach and a bigger ask of the VA to identify claims that a veteran should be able to file for and win. But I do think it's the right thing to do. So moving on. So that's where the disconnect is, right? So it's VHA and VBA butting heads on who should be giving the information out to veterans on whether or not they should be filing for a claim or whether or not a claim should get processed or re-adjudicated. Moving on. One of the recommendations in the June report was that the Benefits Administration send out new letters to tens of thousands of Vietnam veterans and their survivors who may have been overlooked. Yet the Benefits Administration took the unusual step of disagreeing with the recommendation. My best guess is that they know this is going to create a lot of rework, he says. He says the Benefits Administration is currently under enormous strain from the 2022 passage of the PACT Act, one of the largest expansions of veterans' benefits in history. It led to a massive VA hiring surge to keep up with new claims. And after a long fight from advocates, VA also decided in August to make medically unexplained chronic multi-symptom illness known as Gulf War illness a presumptive condition for more than 15,000 veterans, known as K2 vets, who served at the air base there in Uzbekistan. I can't even say that either. They really don't need another 87,000 dumped into their lap, he says, but our opinion is we are here to make sure veterans are made whole. VA wouldn't respond to questions from the war horse about the report, instead referring to a memo from Joshua Jacobs, Department of Veterans Affairs Undersecretary for Benefits. He said that the Office of Inspector General repeatedly mischaracterized VA's obligation. Jacobs wrote that the Inspector General's interpretation is at odds with the text of the consent decree. Its enforcement history in the courts and the parties' understanding of the agreement. A bubble on the horizon is the next section. The $844 million that the VA may owe Vietnam veterans may be hard for the department to come by. That's because it's facing one of the biggest financial crises ever, driven by millions of veterans who are owed compensation for their service-related disabilities. In July, VA told members of Congress that the department was facing a budget shortfall of $15 billion across the remainder of 2024 and 2025, raising the House Committee on Veterans Affairs Chairman Mike Bost. He blamed horrendous top-to-bottom mismanagement for the massive deficit. I agree. It's the largest budget shortfall in the department's history, and VA is attributing it to increased cost caused by the PACT Act. Forecasting. I mean, there's no other place probably that you could go, hey, I'm pretty sure that all of this huge influx of disability claims that are coming in that we are taking an average time of whatever it is, 8 months to process with an average award amount of X, you have like an 8-month lead up time to figure out how much you're going to be short. I'm just saying it's not the end of the, it's not the most difficult thing to figure out. I mean, of course, you're not going to nail it, but you're going to be closer. This budget shortfall means that 7 million veterans and their surviving family members are at risk of not receiving benefit payments as soon as October 1st. But $15 billion is only a drop in the bucket compared to the startling costs the department faces in coming years. Veterans benefits always peak long after war is finished. While last year, the VA paid out about $143 billion to about 6 million veterans, the estimate that now that the U.S. owes more than $2 trillion in medical and disability payments to veterans just from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It is a staggering amount, she says. These benefits that have been promised to people but not paid out yet, it's not speculative. In fact, the 2023 financial report for the United States government, compiled by the Department of Treasury, lists veteran benefits as one of the country's most significant financial liabilities. Suzanne Gordon, a senior policy analyst at the nonpartisan think tank Veterans Healthcare Policies Institute, says that the U.S. has the resources to fulfill its commitments to veterans. We're a very rich nation, she says. There's no question that we can afford it. The question is, why don't we want to afford it? That's a good question. There's money going everywhere. And I've said this before. We're not typically the loudest group out there. We should be. But there's a lot of groups out there that are loud, and hungry mouths get fed. Just saying. All right. So she says that the previous U.S. wars were paid for by increasing taxes and government budget cuts to non-war spending. But since 9/11, she says, we've paid for all our wars entirely through borrowing, which has been one of the factors driving up the national debt. I'm not sure how you say it, another name, Bilms, I don't know. Suggestion is to create a trust fund for veterans in order to safeguard the promised money and plan for how much is needed. We have a huge bubble here that is on the horizon, she says, which is rapidly becoming bigger thanks to the expanded presumptive benefits. For Gordon, the answer is straightforward. If we can afford war, we can afford to take care of our veterans, she says. And if we can't afford to take care of veterans, then we shouldn't engage in wars that are often elective and non-essential to the defense of the nation. Mark Jackson, a K2 veteran and board member at the Stronghold Freedom Foundation, says money is a constant conversation when it comes to veterans benefits, but VA's focus on money can end up changing the lives of veterans. If you make this amount of money, it's no longer about lives. It's no longer about service, he said. It becomes a line item that makes it a whole lot easier to say no. Though the Veterans Benefits Administration hasn't agreed to send out letters to the approximately 87,000 Vietnam veterans who may have been owed benefits, the agency did agree to create a working group to study how it can improve the ways to it identifies potentially eligible veterans. The Inspector General's office will hold the agency to account by requesting an update on the working group's progress every 90 days. Meanwhile, McCabe won't be out of a job anytime soon. If he plans to continue to travel across the country, hosting local town halls to talk to Vietnam veterans and survivors about their eligibility for benefits, just recently he helped Susan Mayer, the widow of a Vietnam veteran, Henry Mayer, appeal the denial of her husband's claim for bladder cancer that was filed 10 years ago, 2 years before he passed away from the disease. I'm not looking for money, says Meyer, who lives in Fort how funny. Myers, Florida. I'm doing it for my husband. She said that it is difficult to only get the claim approved after her husband has passed away when he was the one who served. Still, she says, it will change my life. All right, that concludes it. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.